At Folly Farm at the Penguin Coast, we have Humboldt penguins here, and they're really important. They are vulnerable in the wild. In South America, down the coastlines of Peru and Chile, there are only 16,000 pairs left, so they are endangered and part of a really important breeding programme, which is why we're really excited that we have just had 5 Humboldt penguin chicks hatch here. Part of the breeding programme, the main reason for it is to make sure that we keep all the genetics well looked after, so that we're not doing any breeding with long distant relations and things like that. So there's one person who's in charge of that called the stud bookkeeper, and they take it all of the Humboldt penguins in European zoos and make sure they go through all of the family trees and make sure that whenever we have any chicks in any zoos, they actually get relocated to correct zoos that they can have long-term partners with, because Humboldt penguins, they do mate for life, so it's really important that they do actually find the right partner and that they're in the right zoo to be able to do that. The Humboldt penguins, they usually lay 2 eggs, and then if really lucky and they both hatch, they literally will hatch out of an egg pretty much this size, and the chick will just fit in the size of your palm. They do double in weight every other day, so they get really big really quickly, that's from both the parents taking it turns to feed them. So within even less than 4 weeks, they're a kilo in weight, and then they eventually grow into their flippers and are pretty much almost the same size as their parents at 12 weeks old. So the emperors, emperor penguins being the largest penguin, so they can be up to a metre. Humboldt penguins are much smaller, so we're kind of aiming like this, the really big ones about this, but they are, when they are fully grown, they are still completely tiny compared to an emperor penguin, and you'll find that cold climate penguins, so like emperors and kings, they're a lot larger, and then as you work your way up, so when you go to New Zealand and South Africa, South America, like our Humboldt penguins, they get smaller and smaller. Yeah, these are a lot more happier in the sunshine and a warmer climate. When they're still in the nest, they are really fluffy, really soft, and that's why they're not waterproof at all, which is why the parents have to go fishing, come back and regurgitate for their chicks. Now, once they've kind of got out to that age, about 12 weeks old, when they are ready to fledge the nest, that means they have to be waterproof, ready to hunt for themselves and go fishing. So what we find is when they're in the nest still with the parents, they have what we call penguin dandruff. So it looks a little bit sort of white all over, and that's just them kind of losing that quite soft kind of coating that keeps them, nice and warm when they're first kind of hatching and everything. And then they get their first coat, but this is like a juvenile coat. It's almost like a navy kind of greyish colour, and they'll keep that then for a year until they go through their first molt. The only thing that does stay the same, if you look at Humboldt penguins, they've got dots all over their chests. That's a bit like a person having freckles, and they stay with them for life. So even if they're molting, those dots are always going to come back in the same place. So that's really important in the wild. They can actually make sure that the same pairs are going back to the same nest by documenting those patterns. So they're really special to each penguin. We have gone for a unisex naming theme. We have a naming theme each breeding season, and that just helps to kind of keep count of each year. We have had over 40 chicks hatch in the past 10 years, so it helps us as well. We've gone for cheeses. We do have macaroni penguins here, so that works out quite well. But also them being unisex, that's quite nice because we can't actually tell whether they're males or females until we can do a DNA sample from their feathers at a later date. So that works out quite well, having a mozzarella, a camembert, a gorgonzola, halloumi and a cheddar. So usually when they're quite young, you think, oh, they're all kind of scaredy cats. Quite rightly, the parents are looking after them. But because we obviously have quite big characters in the parents, that usually kind of rubs off onto the little ones, the little chicks. So mozzarella, for example, their parents is Magnum and Feast, and they're quite like a nervous couple. So mozzarella, even though he's the oldest, she's the oldest, at 7 weeks, still quite nervous. And then we have another one called Cheddar, who's only about 6 weeks, but is already kind of coming out of the nest and looking at the world. Obviously a little bit braver the parents, so that makes he's a little bit more confident. So you do kind of see the characters shine that way as well. In the wild, it's about 20 years. In zoos then, they can live up to about 30 years. Our oldest would have been just over 30. And the reason, obviously, they're here, they have all their veterinary care, and they have fish taken to them if they want it. So they have like around the clock care throughout their whole life. So they do live obviously longer, and if they get a little bit slower, that's fine, whereas in the wild, they might be an easy meal. When the chicks are obviously with the parents, they're having everything done for them, and they're having their fish brought back to them, being regurgitated from both parents, but as soon as those kind of waterproof feathers come in, you know, the parents, they can't keep up to keep feeding like another penguin, and at this point the parents will stop feeding the chicks, and this kind of encourages them to go out and actually go fishing for themselves. They do have waterproof feathers, so that's great, but obviously they've never been in the water before. It's a huge jump, and then what we find in the wild is that they actually lose only the strongest survive. They do lose half their body weight when they fledge the nest. So if they're already a little bit weak, it is a lot more of a struggle for those ones. So obviously here in zoos, you know, we take that extra care for them, and at that point we actually move them into a penguin nursery, and because we weigh our penguin chicks regularly, we know when the parents have kind of taken a step back and stopped feeding them as much, and then when they start coming out, the chicks start coming out of the nest, that's when we know, okay, they need to be taken to the nursery. And the reason we take them here is we just want to make sure that we can feed them fish so well that they can take it all on their own, and they can go swimming in our little swimming pool for the penguin chicks. And then once they're happy eating on their own, we know that we can put them back into the main group with all the others, and they can go swimming on their own, and they've already got that extra bit of weight on them. So even if they struggle a little bit to compete with all of the others, they've got that weight to see them through. And then you usually find they're just copying all of the parents, and they're just going for it. But a lot of people kind of think, oh, do the parents, you know, miss them? The parents literally kick them out. So they're quite savage. Once they're done, they are done. But also when they're out in the pool, you know, you might get a chick kind of near their parents, but it's very black and white with a penguin. They will literally stop feeding them completely, and it does just mean that the penguin learns those skills much quicker. So even if the chicks try and come back in, they'll be quite brutal and block the nest. They've obviously done their part, and those chicks do have those survival skills now. So even when they're out in the water, down by the pool, they will learn from obviously the other penguins, and kind of pick up quite quickly as well, especially when they've had that extra weight on them from the nursery. But even if they bump into their parents, you know, there's no sort of connection there. They're quite they treat everyone the same then, and obviously they are a colony, so they're still very close, but they don't give them any special treatment.